Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a truly fascinating exploration, looking closely at excerpts from Anne Frank's The Diary of a Young Girl.
It really is fascinating. And what makes this particular deep dive so compelling, I think, is the layers of the diary itself. We're not just engaging with the well-known published version.
Right.
We're acknowledging that these excerpts actually come from Anne's second version of her diary.
Okay.
And in this version, which she wrote while in hiding, she actually created pseudonyms for many of the people she mentioned. So this critical edition we're focusing on, it really represents the scholarly effort to present the most accurate form of her writings, considering all the manuscript versions.
That's right. And it's quite a testament, isn't it, to Otto Frank's sensitive approach when he prepared the diary for publication after the war. He chose to use his own family's real names while honoring Anne's wish for pseudonyms for others.
Yeah, and over time, of course, those courageous individuals who helped the family in the Secret Annex, they're now rightfully remembered by their actual names.
As they should be.
Absolutely. So for everyone else within these excerpts we'll discuss today, we'll be using the pseudonyms just as they appear in this critical edition.
Got it. So our goal today is to really understand Anne's life as a young teenager before the family went into hiding. To get a sense of her relationships, her friendships.
And to explore those initial, really formative experiences within the confines of the Secret Annex itself.
Exactly. So maybe to begin, let's look at what seems like a pretty ordinary event in Anne's life. Her 13th birthday. It sounds like the day started with a fairly typical school celebration, at least on the surface.
It did, yeah. We read that Hannah Lee, who was one of her close friends at the time, who later became known by her real name, Hannah Gosler, she picked her up for school. And at school, Anne shared cookies with her teachers and classmates. And interestingly, despite the fact that she apparently wasn't able to fully participate in gym class because of some physical limitations.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she still got to choose the game, which was volleyball. That little detail, I think it speaks volumes about her spirit, her desire to be involved anyway.
Absolutely. And, of course, the classic happy birthday song sung by her classmates.
Right. It just paints a picture of a young girl wanting to participate and, wow, share joy even with those constraints.
And the celebration didn't stop when the school bell rang, did it?
No, no. Anne had an after-school gathering with some of her closest friends, San Letterman, Ilse Wagner, and Hanali Goslar, who she actually refers to as Lies in the school context.
Right, the pseudonym.
Exactly. And also Jacqueline Van Marsen. And this is where we get that charming little nickname, Anne, Han, and San.
Ah, that's sweet. It really evokes that sort of teenage friendship thing, doesn't it? That camaraderie.
It truly does. It highlights the close bonds she shared with Hannah Lee and San in that period just before, the immense upheaval of the war. It's also quite noteworthy that Jacqueline Van Marsen is specifically introduced as her new best friend.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it suggests that even in her relatively normal life before hiding, Anne's social circles were, they were evolving, friendships were shifting, which is a very typical teenage experience, really.
Totally.
And this context of her navigating friendships makes her later isolation in the annex feel even more poignant, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the birthday fun continued on Sunday with a party where they even showed a Rin Tin Tin movie.
A movie. Wow.
Yeah. And she also mentions the gifts she received, 2 brooches, a bookmark, and 2 books. Simple things, but I'm sure they were deeply cherished. These details really paint a picture of a happy, pretty typical early teenage life.
Exactly. You see a young girl enjoying those quintessential teenage experiences, surrounded by friends and family, celebrating in a way that feels, familiar and relatable. It's just such a stark and heartbreaking contrast to the unimaginable circumstances that were looming just around the corner for her. These memories of normalcy must have been both a comfort and, I imagine, a source of real pain later on in hiding.
I can only imagine. Jumping ahead just a couple of days then to Monday, June 15th, 1942, Anne gives us these incredibly vivid first impressions of some of her classmates.
Oh, yeah, this is fascinating.
It's almost like flipping through a yearbook, isn't it? But with her completely unfiltered, honest commentary, it's amazing how quickly she forms these opinions.
It really is. Her descriptions are remarkably candid, aren't they? Let's take Betty Blumendahl, for instance.
Yeah.
Anne perceives her as coming from maybe a less privileged background, noting that she lives in what Anne considers an obscure part of West Amsterdam.
Right.
She also observes that Betty is hardworking at school, but sort of implies that this is more due to effort than, natural smarts. And she describes her overall demeanor as quiet. It
Mhm.
kind of speaks to Anne's developing awareness of social differences and her directness in assessing her peers.
Yeah, very direct. Then there's Henny Metz, who she sees as nice and cheerful, but also rather loud and childish, especially when they're playing outside.
Hmm.
And she even points out what she considers a negative influence, Henny's friend Beppy, whom Anne rather judgmentally calls dirty and vulgar.
Wow, harsh.
Right. You can already see Anne's strong opinions forming in her clear sense of, I guess, social boundaries, even at 13.
Absolutely. And her description of JR, well, she certainly doesn't mince her words there.
No kidding.
She calls her detestable, sneaky, stuck-up, two-faced, and a gossip. It sounds like there was a significant personality clash going on there.
Think?
Yeah. And the added detail about JR supposedly having Jacques under her spell, it hints at those complex social dynamics and, the power plays that often exist within teenage girl friendships. You really get a sense of Anne's keen observation of these interactions.
It's quite a scathing assessment. And the list keeps going. Ilse Wagner is described as nice and cheerful, but also finicky and prone to complaining.
The complainer.
Yeah, although Anne does acknowledge that Ilse likes her and is intelligent, even if maybe a bit lazy. It's interesting how she often balances the positive and negative traits in these initial takes.
It is. Her observations are so specific. For Hannelie Goslar, or Liz as she's known at school, Anne finds her a bit strange shy when they're out, but apparently much more outspoken at home.
Oh, okay.
And someone who tells her mother absolutely everything.
The classic tell your mom everything friend.
Exactly. But Anne also mentions that she has come to appreciate Lai's honesty. So it seems their friendship had a layer of complexity. And maybe initially found her reserved, but later valued her straightforwardness.
So she could revise her opinions.
Yeah, it suggests Anne was also capable of revising her initial judgments based on, getting to know someone better.
And then we have Nanny von Praxgar, who gets a much more positive write-up. Small, funny, sensible, and smart. And just thinks she's nice.
Simple as that.
Yeah. It's striking how quickly and decisively she categorizes these people in her mind.
It is. And F.G. de Jong seems to be a clear favorite. Anne describes her as terrific, acting mature for her age 12, apparently.
Wow, mature at 12.
Yeah, and very helpful. Anne clearly has a high regard for her maturity and kindness.
And finally, there's Appy Riem, who she sums up rather bluntly as pretty orthodox, but a brat, too.
Ouch.
So within just these few brief descriptions, you get this really clear snapshot of Anne's social world and how she perceives the people around her. Her affections and dislikes are pretty clearly defined.
Definitely. These initial impressions are so valuable because they reveal Anne as, well, a typical teenager, navigating the complexities of friendships, cliques, and those sometimes rather harsh judgments that can be characteristic of that age.
Yeah.
It really sets the stage for understanding her later reflections on relationships within the much more confined and intense world of the Secret Annex.
Now, just a few days later, Saturday, June 20th, 1942, we get this fascinating glimpse into Anne's initial thoughts on the actual act of keeping a diary. It seemed like it was a bit of a strange concept for her at first, something she approached with maybe a degree of skepticism.
Yes, she openly admits that writing in a diary feels strange to her, not just because she hasn't really done it consistently before, but also because she expresses doubt about whether she or, anyone else in the future would actually be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old girl.
It's quite self-aware, isn't it? Almost a little humble.
It is. It suggests she's not initially seeing this as some, grand literary project, but more as a personal, maybe even temporary outlet.
And then she shares that really famous quote, "Paper has more patience than people."
Ah, yes. Such a profound line.
It comes up in a moment where she's feeling a bit down, bored, listless, just sort of wondering whether to go out or stay in. She ends up staying in, brooding, and that's when this thought comes to her. It speaks to a deeper sense of feeling, maybe unheard or misunderstood by those around her, even in her relatively normal life at this point.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes about her inner life and a potential feeling of not being truly seen or understood by the people in her everyday world. She further clarifies her intention for the diary, saying she's primarily writing for herself unless she ever manages to find a real friend.
A real friend.
Yeah. This implies that while she has many acquaintances and social connections, she's longing for something more profound, a more intimate connection with another person, someone she can share her innermost thoughts and feelings with without holding back.
which leads perfectly into her core reason for starting the diary in the first place. She explicitly says she feels like she doesn't have a true friend.
Right.
And she even seems to anticipate disbelief from her diary, Kitty,
Yeah.
pointing out she has loving parents, a sister, and like 30 people she could call friends, plus admirers.
Yeah, she acknowledges that on the surface, her life might look full of connections.
Totally.
But she clarifies that when she's with her friends, their interactions are mainly about having fun, lighthearted stuff. She feels this distinct inability to discuss anything beyond the ordinary, those deeper emotions, vulnerabilities, the introspective thoughts that a true friendship would allow for.
That feeling of loneliness, despite being surrounded by people, it's a really significant theme in these early entries.
It really is, and it underscores the psychological need that the diary starts to fulfill for her. It becomes the non-judgmental confidant she's searching for.
It really sets the stage for why this diary becomes so incredibly important to her. It evolves into that constant friend, the one place she can truly express herself without worrying about judgment or superficiality. Now, shifting gears a bit, we also get a rather funny anecdote about a school experience involving her math teacher, a Mr. Keesing.
Ah, yes, the chatterbox story.
Exactly. This provides a nice bit of levity.
It does. This story gives us a delightful glimpse into Anne's, well, spirited personality and her creative way of handling authority. It seems Anne had a bit of a reputation for talking in class.
Shocking for a teenager.
Right. A very relatable trait. And Mr. Keesing's rather unconventional method for dealing with this was to assign her essays as punishment. The first one was on the subject of an incorrigible chatterbox.
Classic teacher move. But apparently that didn't quite work because she kept talking.
So, undeterred, Mr. Keesing assigned a second essay, same topic. But the third time, he really upped the ante with the rather amusing title. "Quack, quack, quack," said Mistress Chatterbox.
Oh my gosh, you can just imagine the classroom laughing at that one. It shows a certain playful dynamic, maybe?
It certainly does. It reveals Mr. Keesing's own sense of humor, too, a somewhat playful rather than purely mean approach to classroom management. But Anne, ever resourceful and quick-witted, wasn't about to be outdone.
No.
She cleverly got help from her friend San, who apparently had a talent for poetry, and together they decided to write the entire essay in verse.
That's brilliant. And the poem itself is just fantastic. It was about a mother duck and a father swan who had 3 baby ducklings. But the ducklings quacked too much, apparently, which annoyed their father, the swan, so much that he bit them all to death.
Whoa, a bit dark for a school essay.
Right, but certainly incredibly original and imaginative. It's a fantastic example of Anne's sharp wit.
It was an incredibly clever and, frankly, rather audacious way for Anne to essentially turn the tables on Mr. Keesing and respond to his punishment creatively.
And how did he react?
Well, it sounds like he actually appreciated the humor and the obvious effort she put into it. He not only read the poem aloud to her class, adding his own funny comments,
No way.
but he also shared it with several other classes as well.
That's amazing.
The result of this witty comeback was that Anne was no longer yelled at for talking, Mr. Keesing stopped giving her extra homework, and he even started making jokes himself. It shows a really nice evolution in their relationship, moving towards mutual respect and, well, understanding.
It's such a charming little story. It highlights Anne's wit and intelligence, but also her ability to navigate authority figures in a really unique and memorable way. Okay, let's shift focus now to Anne's first romantic interest, someone she affectionately calls Hello.
Young love.
This seems to have developed around Wednesday, July 1st, 1942. It marks the beginning of her exploration into romantic feelings.
Yes, she mentions having gotten to know him quite well over the preceding week. We later learn his real name was Helmuth Silberberg.
Helmuth, okay.
He'd come from Gelsenkirchen in Germany and was living with his grandparents in Amsterdam at the time. His parents were in Belgium, but because of the war, they couldn't travel to him.
Wow, so even then, the war was disrupting families like that.
Absolutely. It hints at the disruption and separation impacting even these early teenage interactions.
And it sounds like Anne got a bit of a confidence boost from this budding romance. Hello had previously dated someone named Ursula, whom Anne rather dismissively describes as perfectly sweet and perfectly boring.
Ouch. Poor Ursula.
Apparently, meeting Anne made Hello realize he'd been, in his own words, falling asleep at Ursula's side, leading Anne to see herself as a kind of pep tonic for him.
Huh. A pep tonic? That's classic teenage feeling, isn't it? Feeling special and seen like that.
Totally.
There's that undeniable youthful exuberance and the flattering feeling of capturing someone's attention that way. She also mentions her friend Jacques spending Saturday night with her. followed by a rather uneventful and, in Anne's opinion, bored stiff Sunday afternoon. It seems Hello was actually supposed to visit that Sunday evening, suggesting he was becoming quite important in her social life.
And then we have this almost movie-like moment where Hello actually calls her on the phone.
The phone call.
Yeah. Anne answers, and he formally identifies himself as Helmuth Silberberg, specifically asking for Anne. The playful back and forth as they confirm who's quite sweet and innocent. But then, as often happens, things get a little more complicated.
They do. Hello then reveals that his grandmother has expressed disapproval of him seeing Anne regularly.
Oh,
She felt Anne was simply too young for him. The grandmother even suggested he should be spending his time visiting the Lowenbachs instead. So this introduces the first external hurdle to their romance, a parental figure or grandparental figure stepping in.
but Hello's response is pure teenage defiance, isn't it? All's fair in love and war.
Classic. It clearly shows his determination to see Anne despite his grandmother's objections.
And interestingly, right after this phone call, Anne bumps into Peter Schiff, someone who hadn't acknowledged her for ages, and his simple hello really cheered her up.
That's a great point. It's like a little reminder that she has other connections and sources of happiness beyond just this one new crush.
Yeah, it underscores that fluid, shifting nature of teenage emotions.
Definitely. And the story continues with Hello actually meeting Anne's parents on Monday evening.
The big meet the parents moment.
Exactly. Sounds pretty traditional. Cake, candy, tea, cookies. But then they went for a walk together, and Hello kept Anne out a little past what her father thought was okay,
Oh dear.
resulting in her father being quite angry and imposing a new, earlier curfew. 10 o'clock down to 8.
Wow, that's harsh. Classic dad move, though.
Totally. A classic parental reaction to tardiness, especially with a young daughter.
But despite the curfew drama, Anne does mention being invited to Hello's place the following Saturday.
Ah, so the romance continued.
Seems like it. Despite the grandmother's disapproval and the new curfew, this whole episode just gives us this charming glimpse into that typical teenage drama. First crushes, navigating expectations, dealing with parents. Even with all the growing anxiety around them, these very normal teenage experiences were still happening in Anne's life.
It really does, and it's quite poignant, isn't it? A reminder that even as their world was becoming increasingly dangerous and restricted, these very human and universal experiences of teenage romance and social stuff continued to be part of Anne's daily life, offering maybe a brief sense of normalcy amidst the encroaching darkness.
Absolutely. Now let's turn our attention to another significant development around this time. Her acceptance into the Jewish Lyceum. This wasn't straightforward, was it? It reflects the increasing segregation and limitations being forced on Jewish people.
No, not straightforward at all. She was initially only granted conditional acceptance. The original plan was actually for her to stay in the 7th grade of her Montessori school, which she'd been attending.
Okay.
But with the escalating restrictions on Jewish children attending regular schools, Mr. Elte, the head of the Jewish Lyceum, after some apparent persuasion, finally agreed to accept both Anne and her friend, Liz Goslar.
Ah, lies too.
Yeah. This decision really highlights the difficult choices and adaptations Jewish families were being forced to make about their kids' education.
And Lies, even though she got in, faced a setback, right? Having to repeat geometry.
That's right. And Anne expresses sympathy for her, noting the rather challenging home environment Liz had for studying.
What was that like?
While Anne paints a vivid picture of a pretty chaotic Goslar household, she mentions a spoiled 2-year-old sister constantly disrupting Li's studying, and parents who also contributed to the noise and stress.
Oh man, trying to study geometry with a toddler around. Tough.
Exactly. It really emphasizes the diverse challenges young people faced trying to continue their education under these increasingly oppressive circumstances. For some, it wasn't just the external restrictions, but also the internal disruptions at home.
It's a stark contrast to the relatively more structured and calm environment of the Frank household before they had to hide. This whole thing really underscores the growing, pervasive impact of the war on the everyday lives of Jewish families in Amsterdam, hitting fundamental areas like education and just the ability for kids to learn.
Precisely. Now we move to that crucial moment just before the Frank family and others make the decision to go into hiding. Anne writes about this pivotal decision and the initial preparations. While she doesn't give a specific date for the final decision, we know from later entries it was sometime before July 9th, 1942. The sense of impending change and the need for secrecy must have been just immense.
The urgency and gravity are almost palpable in her writing. They started packing their most important belongings into ordinary school bags.
Right, trying to look normal while doing this extraordinary thing.
And it's so telling what Anne prioritized in those moments. The very first item she put in her bag was her diary,
Of course.
followed by everyday things like curlers, handkerchiefs, school books, a comb, and some old letters she treasured. These choices give such a powerful insight into what mattered to a young girl on the brink of such a massive life change.
Absolutely. She admits putting some rather crazy things in her bag, but immediately follows that by saying, with remarkable maturity for 13, that she's not sorry because memories mean more to me than dresses. It reveals this profound understanding of the value of her personal history, her inner life, the connections to her past, even as her physical world was about to shrink so dramatically. It speaks to a deep sense of self and an awareness of what truly sustains us.
We also see the flurry of practical activity as the decision is finalized. Her father, Odo, made a crucial phone call to Mr. Kleiman, a trusted business associate and one of their vital future helpers. Mr. Van Daan also left to contact Miep Gies, another absolutely pivotal figure in their survival.
Essential.
Shortly after, Miep arrived at their apartment and promised to return later with a bag of essential clothing, underscoring the need for immediate secrecy and discretion. This quick succession of actions highlights how suddenly their plans accelerated.
Anne poignantly describes a quiet and somewhat surreal atmosphere in their apartment right after these arrangements were made. A stark contrast to the activity before and the emotional weight of the decision. She notes that none of them felt like eating.
Sure sign of stress.
Totally. A powerful indicator of the stress and anxiety they were all feeling. The combination of the sweltering heat that summer and the sheer strangeness and finality of the situation clearly weighed heavily on them. The sense of unease, the gravity of their choice, it's very present in her writing, even in these brief observations.
And then comes Thursday, July 9th, 1942, the actual day they went into hiding. Anne recounts the rather somber scene of walking in the pouring rain with her father and mother, each carrying school bags and shopping bags filled with those carefully selected belongings. The weather itself seems to mirror the mood.
The image is incredibly powerful, isn't it? Walking through Amsterdam so early, ordinary people on their way to work casting sympathetic, knowing glances, and herself mentions that the conspicuous yellow star spoke for itself,
Chilling.
starkly highlighting their vulnerability, the visible mark of otherness they were forced to wear, a constant reminder of their persecuted status. This walk in the rain was their final public act as a, well, seemingly normal family.
It was during this fateful walk that her parents finally revealed the full details of their long-held plan, explaining they'd been gradually and secretly moving furniture and essentials out of their apartment and into the hiding place for months.
Incredible foresight and planning.
Yeah. The original date they intended to hide was July 16th, but Margot's unexpected call-up notice, the official summons for deportation, forced them to move everything forward by 10 whole days.
Wow, 10 days earlier, that sudden shift really underscores the immense pressure and the ever-present threat they were living under.
Absolutely. This last-minute forced acceleration just underscores the extreme urgency and the profound disruption the Nazi regime's actions were causing. It meant they had to adapt incredibly quickly, leaving behind the last bits of their former lives with little time for proper goodbyes or even the orderly rooms they'd initially imagined in hiding.
The sheer speed at which their lives were being irrevocably changed is truly striking. It emphasizes the lack of control they had over their own destinies.
Now, having finally arrived at their secret hiding place, Anne provides us with a crucial description of the secret annex itself. It's important for us to visualize this space, right? Located in the back section of the building at 263 Prinsengracht, behind Otto Frank's business, a hidden world within a familiar one.
She meticulously outlines the layout of this confined space. She describes the main room, which served as the kitchen and bedroom for Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan Herman and Auguste Van Pels, their real names, and also function as the general living, dining, and study area for all 8 occupants eventually.
8 people in one main room, wow.
Yeah. Then there was the much smaller, rather cramped side room, designated as Peter Van Daan's private bedroom. And just like the front part of the building, there was also an attic space above and a smaller loft area even higher up. It was a multi-level concealed space designed to house them in complete secrecy.
She finishes her initial description with a somewhat wry and understated comment. So there you are. Now I've introduced you to the whole of our lovely annex.
You can really sense that mixture, can't you? Apprehension about this new, confined reality, but also a touch of that characteristic Anne Frank dark humor peeking through even then. speaks to her resilience.
Absolutely. And the following day, Friday, July 10th, she continues, focusing on their very first impressions of being inside the secret annex.
Mm-hmm.
She recounts how Miep, their trusted helper, led them through the familiar long hallway of the office building, up the steep wooden stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Then Miep opened a seemingly ordinary door, revealing the hidden space. And then, in such a profound act, she shut the door firmly behind them, leaving the Frank family and Margot, who'd arrived earlier, alone in their new secret world. That closing door must have felt incredibly symbolic.
Oh, definitely. Anne vividly describes the rooms as being incredibly cluttered and just full of things, cardboard boxes piled high on the floors, even on the beds, filled with various items moved there secretly over the preceding months.
They're not exactly move-in ready.
Not at all. The small room meant for Peter was packed almost floor to ceiling with stacks of linens. It paints a picture of a space intended for storage, now suddenly needing to function as a home for several people.
The immediate and pressing task facing them was trying to create some semblance of a livable space in this chaos. Anne recounts that her mother, Edith, and her sister, Margot, were just completely exhausted from the stress and the move, and they simply lay down on the bare mattresses.
Understandable.
But Anne and her father, Otto, whom she affectionately calls the two cleaner-uppers in the family, immediately started tidying up.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it? Their proactive, resilient nature, their desire to establish some order and normalcy even then.
She also makes a crucial observation about the windows, noting they were immediately blacked out. That detail underscores the absolute necessity for complete secrecy, a constant awareness that would shape their daily lives.
Mm-hmm. And importantly, she introduces the immediate neighbors. The keg company on one side, a furniture workshop on the other. This proximity to potentially noisy businesses immediately highlights a critical need for absolute silence, especially during work hours, to avoid any suspicion.
Right, the constant risk of being heard. They even made the difficult decision to forbid Margot from coughing at night, even though she had a bad cold.
Can you imagine? They gave her codeine to try and suppress it. It highlights the extreme measures, the constant fear of any sound betraying them, just underscores the precariousness of their situation.
Amidst all this initial settling in, Anne expresses a clear anticipation for the arrival of the Van Dam family, scheduled for the following Tuesday. She openly hoped their arrival would bring more fun and a little less of the oppressive silence that had already started settling in.
Yeah, it seems even in those very early days, the silence and isolation were already starting to get to her, a lively, social teenager. Feeling nervous, stir-crazy, especially during the long evenings and nights. She even confessed wishing one of their helpers could somehow sleep there with them, just for reassurance and to break the quiet.
This early longing for connection, for less of that psychological burden of silence, it speaks volumes about her social nature and the profound emotional impact of being suddenly confined like that. Her desire for the Van Dams' arrival underscores her need for more interaction, a hope for a slightly less intense atmosphere.
Definitely. The Van Dams, Herman, Gus, and their son Peter did eventually arrive around September 2nd, 1942. And Anne's initial observations of their family dynamics present a rather stark contrast to her own family. It's like two different worlds colliding in those confined walls.
Yeah, almost immediately, Anne witnesses what she calls a terrible fight between Mr. and Mrs. Van Dam, something she explicitly notes she'd never seen between her own parents.
Over something trivial, too, she says. Not even worth recording. It sets a different tone immediately, highlighting a more volatile, openly conflictual dynamic in the Van Dam family compared to the Franks.
She also keenly observes the impact this parental conflict has on their teenage son, Peter, who's caught in the middle. But Anne's initial perception of Peter isn't particularly sympathetic here.
No, it's quite critical, actually. She describes him as hypersensitive and somewhat lazy. She even seems to mock his concerns about minor ailments, calling him an absolute hypochondriac. It's a fairly harsh initial judgment.
It is, perhaps reflecting her own anxieties about the new arrangement, another teenager in their limited space.
Could be. She also recounts an incident with Mrs. Van Dam's rather dramatic reaction to misplacing something, exclaiming, "Can't you be more careful? That was my last one." Illustrates a certain emotional intensity, maybe possessiveness, in Mrs. Van Dam's personality. Again, highlighting the differing temperaments.
And then makes a rather blunt and funny observation about the Van Dam's abominable Dutch, noting she doesn't dare comment on the men's linguistic errors for fear of insulting them. She mentions they, the Franks presumably, had long since given up trying to correct them because it didn't seem to make any difference anyway.
It's a small detail, but it hints at potential cultural or educational differences. This observation about their Dutch, while seemingly minor, could have contributed to subtle tensions, misunderstandings. Language is fundamental, right? These differences could have created barriers, maybe a sense of otherness between the families.
That makes sense. And also recounts a rather classic teenage incident involving Peter and a forbidden book, specifically, a book about women.
Ah, the forbidden book, always intriguing.
Right. It seems while Margot and Peter were generally allowed to read books Mr. Kleiman brought, the adults kept this one to themselves, which naturally only piqued Peter's curiosity even more.
Exactly. Forbidden fruit syndrome. Peter, in a typical act of teenage rebellion, managed to sneak off with the book to the loft while his mother was downstairs. For 2 whole days, he kept his illicit reading hidden.
Two.
Yeah. Mrs. Van Dane apparently knew, but kept quiet until Mr. Van Dane eventually found the book, confiscated it, thinking that was the end of it. Clearly underestimated his son's determination.
Clearly. Peter, undeterred, immediately started plotting ways to secretly read the rest of this vastly interesting book. This led to a physical confrontation when his father, probably fearing what Peter might be reading, physically dragged him up to the attic.
Wow.
After a bit of a struggle, Peter ended up locked in his room as punishment. It really highlights the power dynamics and discipline within the Van Dane family.
And the disagreement over his punishment is also quite revealing. Different parenting styles, underlying tensions. Mrs. Van Dane wanted to save some bread for Peter, maybe feeling the punishment was too harsh. But Mr. Van Dane was adamant. Peter had to apologize immediately or sleep in the drafty loft. Despite Mrs. Van Dane's protests that missing dinner was enough, Peter remained defiant, refused to apologize, and was banished to the loft for the night.
Although Mr. Van Dane did note the next morning that Peter's bed seemed to have been slept in, maybe softening his stance.
Right. But it actually took 3 full days of sullen looks, stubborn silence, and tension before things in the Van Dane family returned to some semblance of normal. It seems Anne's father, Otto, eventually intervened with a few friendly words to ease the situation.
So Otto played mediator.
Seems like it. This whole incident really underscores the differing parenting styles and the inherent difficulties of navigating family conflicts in that incredibly confined environment.
It certainly does. And it highlights Anne's role as a keen observer of these dynamics, noting the conflict, the discipline, the grudging reconciliation. These early observations undoubtedly shaped her understanding of their personalities later on.
Moving forward to Monday, September 21st, 1942, Anne gives us a collection of general news and observations. One practical addition was a lamp installed above Anne's bed.
Oh, for air raids?
Exactly, to provide some much-needed light during those frightening times. Though she notes they couldn't use it just yet because they were keeping the window slightly open, presumably for ventilation. That constant balancing act between safety and basic needs.
She also expresses understandable concern about her very limited winter wardrobe. Only one long-sleeve dress and just 3 cardigans.
Yeah. Her father, showing his care, gave her permission to knit a white wool sweater. Though she admits the yarn wasn't particularly attractive, the promise of warmth clearly outweighed looks, underscores the resourcefulness needed.
She also mentions some clothing left with friends for safekeeping, but with significant uncertainty about ever getting it back. That constant undercurrent of uncertainty, the precariousness woven into even mundane details, like clothes.
And in a rather humorous, relatable moment, she recounts slamming her diary shut abruptly when Mrs. Van Dane unexpectedly walked in.
Caught.
Probably feeling her private thoughts weren't for sharing, especially with someone she often found challenging. Classic teenage desire for privacy, amplified by the close quarters.
She also shares a funny anecdote about her father's sleepiness, describing him stumbling off to bed, absent-mindedly throwing off her bed socks because his feet felt cold.
Oh, Dads.
Then pulling the blankets completely over his head because the light bothered him, only to peek out moments later. It's a light, very human moment amidst the tension. Reminds us everyday quirks persist.
It is a welcome reminder. Even amidst stress and fear, funny little moments happen, provide respite. The brief chat about Peter calling Margot a Budinsky and their father gently correcting him to sits on her butt also gives a small, charming insight into their family banter, attempts at normalcy through humor.
Now, Anne then recounts what she calls a highly interesting dinner conversation that really sheds light on Mrs. Van Dane's character, particularly around the rather ironic subject of her own modesty.
Ah, yes, the modesty conversation, a moment of sharp social observation from young Anne. The topic at dinner had turned to Pym's, Anne's father's, well-known and genuine modesty.
Hmm.
And seemingly out of nowhere, Mrs. Van Dane, with her tendency to insert herself into every conversation, declared rather emphatically, "I'm very modest and retiring too, much more so than my husband."
Which, coming from Mrs. Van Dan's Anne Caesar, is loaded with irony.
Completely. Anne's internal reaction is priceless. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous? Her immediate private thought captures the gap between Mrs. Van Dane's self-perception and how Anne, and likely others, viewed her. She instantly sees the contradiction in the boastful claim of modesty.
The exchange that follows between Anne's mother, Mrs. Frank, and Mrs. Van Dane is quite telling too. Contrasting personalities, underlying tensions. Mrs. Van Daan, rather than seeing the irony, vehemently defends her self-proclaimed modesty, even as her words and actions right then arguably show the opposite.
Yeah, the back and forth escalates. Mrs. Van Dane clearly feels misunderstood, maybe attacked, gets increasingly defensive.
And then comes the real crux. Mrs. Van Dane's on this long, self-justifying tirade about her modesty, and she turns around and, in a spontaneous, involuntary reaction, shakes her head slightly.
Oh, dear.
Maybe in compassion for what she sees as self-deception, maybe wry irony, not deliberate defiance, just an unconscious response to the absurdity.
But this small reaction didn't go unnoticed by Mrs. Van Daan. It led to her unleashing a rather forceful tongue-lashing on young Anne. Anne describes it as hard, Germanic, mean-spirited, even vulgar.
Wow.
Anne's description of Mrs. Van Daan then is incredibly vivid. A fat, red-faced fishwife. But despite the harshness, Anne, with surprising detachment, actually finds the situation somewhat comical, privately labeling Mrs. Van Daan a silly little scatterbrain.
And it's from this uncomfortable exchange that Anne draws a rather profound conclusion about human nature.
Yes. She reflects that you only really get to know a person after a fight. Only then can you truly judge their real character. It's remarkably mature for someone so young, shows her growing ability to analyze complex, glean deeper understanding even from unpleasant interactions.
It really is a significant observation. Shows her developing emotional intelligence, capacity to learn from even the tense aspects of their shared life. Highlights her emerging understanding of human behavior under pressure, how true character is revealed in conflict.
Amidst the daily routines and dramas, life, in its constrained way, continued. Anne mentions a nice treat, a correspondence course in shorthand arrived for Margot, Peter, and herself, ordered by Bep Voskuil, one of their helpers.
Ah, shorthand, a practical skill.
A small but significant example of their efforts to maintain some normalcy and intellectual stimulation. The idea of mastering a secret code, like shorthand, probably appealed to Anne's adventurous spirit, provided a small sense of control, accomplishment, maybe.
On a more mundane note, Anne laments a terrible pain in her index finger, which unfortunately prevented her from ironing. With a touch of wry humor, she quips, "What luck."
Ha! A small but relatable reminder that even in adversity, daily inconveniences persist. Illicit sarcastic commentary.
The dynamics around the dinner table also shifted subtly. Mr. Van Daan, for some reason, wanted Anne to sit next to him because he felt Margot wasn't eating enough. Anne, ever observant, was fine with this change. Partly because it reminded her of her cat Morchi, and partly because she secretly hoped it would lessen the pressure she felt from her mother, who was always carping at her about her own eating habits.
A little glimpse into the subtle manipulations and power dynamics, even around mealtime seating.
She even makes a rather pointed, maybe teasing remark about Margot being a paragon of virtue in this context, and admits occasionally teasing her about it. Hints at normal sibling rivalry still existing, despite everything.
Later on, around this time, Anne includes a surprisingly detailed and poignant inventory of her personal clothing and other small possessions she'd brought into hiding. She even meticulously lists quantities and, where she remembers, original prices. A very tangible, grounding moment gives a clear sense of the incredibly limited material world she now inhabited.
It's truly revealing. Undershirts, underpants, pajamas, robes, slippers, one pair of shoes, handkerchiefs, stockings, yarn, scarves, belts. It brings home the stark reality of their drastically reduced circumstances. A world pared down to essentials. She also briefly mentions her cousins, Bernhard and Stephen Elias, perhaps wistfully thinking of the broader family she was separated from. A powerful, understated reminder of the immense losses.
It does serve as a stark, sobering reminder of the profound change. From having a full wardrobe to this limited selection representing their entire material world, underscores the sacrifices, the tangible losses.
Then, in an entry dated October 9th, 1942, the tone shifts dramatically. Anne shares truly dismal and depressing news from the increasingly perilous outside world, a significant turning point as the harsh realities of the Nazi persecution become even more starkly apparent.
This is where the brutal realities really come to the forefront in her account. She reports many of their Jewish friends and acquaintances in Amsterdam were being rounded up, taken away in large numbers by the Gestapo. She describes the horrific treatment, the forced transport in overcrowded cattle cars to Westerbork, the transit camp. This news brought the terrifying realities directly into their hidden sanctuary.
Miep shared a rare piece of information: someone had actually managed to escape Westerbork. But this sliver of hope only amplified the horror, didn't it?
Exactly, and reflects on how terrible conditions must be if escape was considered miraculous. She contemplates the severe lack of basic necessities, food, water for the countless people confined there. This news undoubtedly sent a fresh wave of fear and deep despair through the already tense annex.
It absolutely did. A significant, deeply disturbing shift in their understanding of the immediate dangers. No longer just about hiding and avoiding detection. Now hearing direct, harrowing accounts of the potential fate awaiting them if discovered. The news from Westerbork painted a grim, terrifying picture, solidifying the immense risks, underscoring the urgency and desperation.
In the midst of this grim reality, Anne's entries also continue to reveal her remarkable commitment to her studies, her determined efforts to maintain some normalcy and intellectual engagement. In an entry from Wednesday, October 14th, 1942, she gives a detailed glimpse into her busy daily schedule of learning, a testament to her resilience, her thirst for knowledge.
Indeed. Translating French, tackling math, French grammar, history. She makes no secret of her strong dislike for math, though.
A sentiment her father, Otto, apparently shared wholeheartedly. She notes they often had to rely on Margot, the more mathematically inclined sister, for help, a very relatable academic struggle.
But she found genuine enjoyment and accomplishment in shorthand, noting she felt she was making the most progress compared to Margot and Peter. Highlights her intellectual curiosity, her drive to learn new skills, even then. Maybe a competitive spirit, too.
Could be. Miep also brought more news, specifically about furniture being removed from the Van Danes' empty apartment. Recognizing how nervous Mrs. Van Dane was about her possessions, they decided to withhold this upsetting news from her for now.
A small act of considerate omission shows the delicate dynamics, the efforts to protect each other's emotional well-being.
Anne also mentions her father encouraging her to read German writers, like Hebel. While she could read German reasonably well, she admits she usually mumbled the words to herself rather than reading silently.
Funny detail.
Her father had also brought down Goethe and Schiller plays, planning to read Schiller's Don Carlos to her every evening. Speaks volumes about his dedication to her education, their shared intellectual life, even in those challenging circumstances.
This emphasis on literature, shared reading, is powerful. A way to maintain cultural connections, find solace. Inspired by this, Anne's mother, Edith, gave her her own prayer book.
Right, and Anne, being polite, read a few prayers in German to appease her mother, but privately admitted they didn't hold much personal meaning for her, questioned her mother's sudden attempt to make her more overtly religious, hints at underlying differences in their spiritual beliefs, maybe a disconnect in their needs.
Finally, in that same entry, Anne mentions anticipating lighting the stove for the first time, but notes the significant detail that the chimney hadn't been properly swept in ages, expecting a smoky, unpleasant atmosphere.
Another small but telling detail of the practical challenges, potential hazards of trying to live normally in such an abnormal, concealed environment. These glimpses into studies and daily life truly underscore how they strove to maintain routine and find purpose amidst the fear and confinement.
These seemingly small details paint such a vivid picture. The unswept chimney, limited wardrobe, shared dislike of math. Very human, relatable experiences, amplified by the extraordinary context, allows us to connect on a very personal level.
As we move into November 1942, specifically Monday the 2nd, Anne shares more intimate details about daily life and her evolving, often complicated relationships. She mentions Bep Vosgeil staying over one Friday evening. While Anne notes it was fun, Bep apparently didn't sleep well, maybe due to too much wine.
A small, very human detail adds a touch of normalcy.
It does. Reminds us that even in high stress, socializing, maybe a little indulgence could still happen, offer respite. And then recounts having a bad headache, going to bed early, highlighting the physical toll. She also notes Marco was being exasperating again, something many siblings can relate to, shows normal family dynamics persisted.
And then describes a tedious task sorting a mixed-up index card file from the office. She rather pointedly mentions asking Margot and Peter for help, but they were both too lazy, leaving her to do it alone. Hints at maybe an imbalance in chores or teenage reluctance for boring tasks.
But the more significant, emotionally resonant part is Anne's deeply personal reflection on her complex relationships with her mother and Margot, contrasted with the profound affection she holds for her father. She makes a stark admission, often feeling indifferent to her mother's rebukes and Margot's moods, stating her love for them is based solely on them being family, not a deep personal connection, a remarkably candid, somewhat painful realization for a teenager.
It is starkly honest, quite poignant, reveals significant emotional distance. She then sharply contrasts this with her deep affection for her father, Otto, describes a gnawing ache inside when she perceives him showing partiality towards Margot praise, hugs. Anne clearly idolizes him, sees him as a role model, expresses this deep, almost aching longing for his consistent affection and validation. Highlights an emotional need she feels isn't fully met.
She articulates feeling not taken seriously, always seen as the clown and mischief maker, facing double the punishment compared to Margot. She yearns for something more from her father, acceptance for who she is as Anne, not just his daughter. Emphasizes it's not jealousy of Margot, but a fundamental desire to be loved for her own unique qualities. This entry lays bare deep emotional vulnerability, a growing awareness of the intricate, sometimes painful family dynamics.
This entry truly reveals that deep well of emotional need, that growing awareness of complexities, potential imbalances in her closest ties. She also touches on the perceived inconsistency in how her parents treat her, sometimes sensible, sometimes a silly goose, contributing to her feeling misunderstood.
And she concludes this introspective entry reflecting more broadly. Contemplating God might be testing her, that she needs to focus on becoming good independently, regardless of external validation. Poignantly questions who else will ever read her diary letters, finding solace in the diary as her only true confidant. Openly acknowledges her frequent need for emotional consolation, her recurring feeling of often failing to meet expectations. This entry is really key to understanding the richness and complexity of Anne's inner world during this challenging period.
Around this same time, Anne also gives us a more practical glimpse into the food situation and recounts a rather humorous incident involving a surprisingly large quantity of beans they'd acquired, a welcome break from the more emotionally intense entries.
She notes their daily bread delivery, while less than before hiding, was still generally sufficient. They were also actively buying ration books on the black market, a necessity, though prices were steadily rising. To supplement, they made a significant purchase, 300 pounds of dried beans.
300 pounds.
Yeah, intended not just for the 8 in the annex, but also for the helpful office staff below. Shows their efforts to be self-sufficient and support those risking their safety for them.
These heavy sacks were initially stored near the secret entrance, and unfortunately, the weight proved too much. Seams split, beans spilled. They decided to move the remaining sacks to the attic, a task falling largely to Peter Van Daen, given his youth and strength. Of course, with so many beans, something was bound to go hilariously wrong.
Indeed. Peter managed 5 sacks up successfully, but the very last sack, 50 pounds, tragically broke open, resulting in what Anne vividly describes as a flood, or rather a hailstorm, of brown beans cascading down the staircase.
Oh no.
The sheer volume and force created tremendous noise. Those downstairs genuinely thought the house was collapsing. The image is quite chaotic, undoubtedly alarming at the time.
Peter, initially stunned, quickly burst into laughter, seeing Anne at the bottom of the stairs, completely surrounded by a sea of brown beans. They immediately started the daunting task of gathering them up. But anyone who spilled dried beans knows it's remarkably difficult.
Anne humorously notes the beans were not only numerous, but incredibly small and frustratingly slippery, rolling into every conceivable nook and cranny. She recounts that for days, weeks after this bean disaster, it became an ongoing, slightly absurd ritual. Every time someone went up or downstairs, they'd bend over, collect stray beans, and dutifully present their small handfuls to Mrs. Van Daen. It's a lighthearted, very human moment amidst the difficulties, showcasing their ability to find humor even in a messy, ridiculous situation.
Now, a truly significant turning point in the diary, and in the lives of everyone in the annex, occurs with the arrival of a new inhabitant in November 1942. a dentist named Mr. Dussel, an eighth person now living in the already incredibly cramped, increasingly precarious hiding place, further straining resources and taxed interpersonal dynamics.
Mr. Dussel, whose real name was Fritz Pfeffer, arrived on a Wednesday evening. Miep, ever resourceful and mindful of secrecy, helped him remove his coat so the mandated yellow star wouldn't be visible. She took him to Mr. Kleiman's private office downstairs, letting him wait there until the cleaning lady left, ensuring his arrival remained completely undetected. Once clear, Miep, under guise of needing the office, carefully led Mr. Dussel upstairs, revealing the hidden bookcase and the secret annex to his utter astonishment. A moment of profound surprise for him.
Anne recounts the scene. The original 7 inhabitants gathered nervously around the dining table, awaiting the newest member of their confined community. They'd thoughtfully prepared coffee, even a little cognac, to welcome him. Miep first took Mr. Dussel into the Frank family's original rooms, where he immediately recognized their familiar furniture but had no idea the Franks were actually living above him. When Miep finally revealed the truth, Anne describes his reaction as utter shock, disbelief, stating he nearly fainted from sheer surprise, a moment that dramatically altered their secret world.
His initial reaction was profound disbelief, utter confusion. He immediately questioned if the Franks weren't actually in Belgium. Seems he'd heard rumors, misinformation about their supposed escape. He even asked about an officer, a car, showing the extent of rumors circulating. It clearly took a significant moment for the full reality of the Franks living above him for months to truly sink in. A revelation drastically changing his own circumstances and understanding.
Anne's initial impressions of Mr. Dussel were surprisingly positive. She saw him as a very nice man. He apparently didn't object immediately to sharing a relatively small room with her, though Anne candidly admits she wasn't exactly thrilled about a complete stranger using her things, invading her space.
Understandable.
But she quickly understood the overriding necessity, accepted it for a good cause, sheltering another person in desperate need. Her father, Otto, poignantly articulated their guiding principle: if we can save even one of our friends, the rest doesn't matter. Highlights the deep compassion, moral obligation behind their actions.
The initial days involved a barrage of practical questions from Dussel about the intricate, often unspoken daily routines established over preceding months. He peppered Anne with inquiries: cleaning lady's schedule, washroom procedures, the delicate topic of toilet access. Anne, with remarkable patience for a teenager, explaining intimate details of hidden life to a stranger, diligently answered. However, she did observe with surprise how slow he seemed grasping these new rules, his tendency to ask the same questions repeatedly, as if he couldn't process or remember. Despite this, Anne expressed hope his confusion would pass as he got accustomed to their unique, challenging life.
Unfortunately, along with his arrival, Mr. Dussel also brought a stark, sobering reminder of the escalating dangers, the increasingly brutal realities outside. He shared deeply troubling, profoundly sad news about countless friends, acquaintances, people they knew, being rounded up, taken away to what he described as a dreadful fate.
He recounted the ever-increasing presence of menacing green and gray military vehicles patrolling Amsterdam, the fear-inducing house-to-house searches for remaining Jews, the virtual impossibility of escaping the city without resorting to the extreme risk of hiding, as they had.
He also brought harrowing accounts of the Gestapo's systematic, cruel methods, describing how they used lists, even offered monetary bounties for betraying hidden Jews, chillingly comparing it to slave hunts of the olden days, painted an even grimmer picture of escalating desperation, brutality, immense danger surrounding them.
Anne recounts his vivid, heart-wrenching descriptions. Long lines of innocent people marched through streets, sick, frail, elderly, young children, babies cruelly herded by intimidating men who bullied and terrorized them. He made it clear no one was spared: infirm, old, children, pregnant women. This news undoubtedly cast a heavy shadow over the already fearful annex, bringing terrifying realities brutally into their fragile sanctuary.
In a lighter, more personal moment, in an entry from Monday, December 7th, 1942, Anne makes a direct, rather humorous address to Kitty, her diary personification, apologizing for a previous obscure passage she'd written.
Oh, yeah. What did she say?
She playfully advises against rereading it or trying to understand it, stating quite definitively, because you'll never find your way out again.
It's a charming, self-deprecating little aside. Offers a brief glimpse into her evolving relationship with her diary and her own writing.
Around this time, as year-end approached, they experienced the unusual near coincidence of Hanukkah and the traditional Dutch St. Nicholas Day. Anne notes they didn't make a big fuss over Hanukkah that year, largely due to scarcity of precious candles, only lighting them briefly each evening. underscores the limitations in observing traditions and hiding. However, Mr. Van Dane, in a thoughtful, resourceful gesture, managed to fashion a makeshift menorah from simple wood pieces, a small act of cultural religious observance amidst difficulties. St. Nicholas Day, a significant gift-giving holiday in the Netherlands, seems to have been somewhat more elaborate, joyful. Anne recounts each person woke to find a small, wrapped package tucked inside their shoes, placed the night before in a decorated laundry basket with a humorous note. The sheer size of the basket initially surprised everyone, given limited resources, a testament to helpers' ingenuity and residents' desire to maintain familiar holiday traditions.
The note humorously alluded to their dramatically changed circumstances compared to the previous year, acknowledging they now had nothing left to give away traditionally, so would find a different way, led to the delightful discovery in their shoes. A heartwarming moment showcasing resilience, ability to find small joys, and the kindness, thoughtfulness still permeating their hidden community.
Another rather amusing, albeit slightly painful, incident involved Mrs. Van Daan, Mr. Dussel, and a troublesome toothache.
Oh, the dental drama.
Yes, Mrs. Van Daan was suffering, and Mr. Dussel, playing amateur dentist, tried to examine her ailing tooth. This quickly devolved into a chaotic, comical scene.
Yes, it seems Mrs. Van Daan was not a particularly a cooperative patient, and vividly recounts her flailing arms and legs dramatically during Dussel's examination, causing his dental probe to get inadvertently rather firmly stuck in her tooth.
Oh no.
Understandably led to a theatrical vocal reaction from Mrs. Van Daan, cries of discomfort, increasingly frantic attempts to dislodge the probe, which, in her agitated state, she only seemed to push further in, much to her growing distress.
While Mrs. Van Daan was clearly in discomfort, the others couldn't help but erupt into suppressed laughter at the sheer absurdity, the slapstick nature of it all. Anne admits it was very mean of us to find humor, but the mental image of Dussel calmly observing the pandemonium, hands on hips, looking perplexed, is indeed quite comical.
Eventually, after much squirming, shouting, panicked maneuvering, she finally managed to yank the probe out. Incredibly, Dussel then seemed to simply continue his self-appointed dental work as if nothing untoward had just happened, even enlisting bewildered help from Mr. Van Daan and a still giggling Anne.
Unbelievable.
Anne, in her diary, amusingly likens the entire farcical episode to a medieval engraving titled A Quacket at Work. Throughout the ordeal, Mrs. Van Daan's primary concern seemed to be keeping a watchful eye on her soup and her share of food, suggests she wouldn't be eager for another impromptu dental exam by Dussel anytime soon, a much-needed, genuinely funny moment.
The diary entries from this period also consistently reveal the often strained, complex relationship Anne had with her mother, Edith. She frequently writes about snapping at her during arguments, often feeling like a hopeless case in her mother's eyes. A common mother-teenage-daughter dynamic may be amplified by the intense confinement.
Indeed. Anne recounts her mother's typical reaction, firmly telling Anne not to talk back, then essentially giving her the silent treatment for a couple of days before tension gradually dissipated. Anne, with growing self-awareness, reflects on her own difficulty drastically altering her behavior day to day, her increasing preference to keep deeper thoughts to herself rather than share with her mother. Even admits occasionally harboring a fleeting desire to treat others with the same perceived contempt she sometimes felt she received, highlights the emotional toll of ongoing conflicts.
This recurring pattern of conflict, emotional distance between Anne and her mother, is significant, persistent throughout the diary. Underscores not just typical generational clashes, but how these were undoubtedly intensified by the incredibly close, often stressful living conditions. Anne's underlying longing for a more understanding, empathetic, supportive maternal figure is quite evident.
In stark contrast, Anne often found amusement, maybe distraction, observing dinner table dynamics, particularly Mrs. Van Daan's anecdotes. Mr. Van Daan, in his blunt, sometimes insensitive way, would occasionally make mocking comments, often aimed at Margot, like her small appetite being a deliberate attempt to keep your figure. Perhaps intended as light teasing, often seemed to carry a sharper edge.
And Anne's mother, Edith, typically reacted by immediately defending Margot, often telling Mr. Van Daan firmly to cease his stupid chatter. However, Mrs. Van Daan herself wasn't immune to sharing the spotlight, often entertaining with stories from her past. One anecdote Anne recounts involved Mrs. Van Daan's father giving her old-fashioned advice on handling unwanted advances. Simply say, "Remember, sir, that I'm a lady."
Very old school.
Anne notes these particular stories often resulted in the others splitting their sides laughing, as if Mrs. Van Daan intended a good joke. Shows that despite underlying tensions, stressful atmosphere, there were also moments of shared laughter, connection within their confined community.
As 1943 began, Anne's entries increasingly incorporate more news from the outside world, alongside her growing awareness of rising anxieties within the Annex. On Saturday, February 27, 1943, she notes Pym, her father, was anticipating the Allied invasion almost any day. Reflects the heightened hope the war's tide might soon turn.
She also briefly mentions Churchill's pneumonia and Gandhi's hunger strike in India. Shows how significant global events still penetrated their secret world became topics of concern. Interestingly, Anne observes that while Mrs. Van Daan often claimed to be fatalistic, she was invariably the most visibly afraid during gunfire, revealing a possible gap between stated beliefs and actual emotional responses.
Jan, one helper, brought an episcopal letter circulated from Dutch bishops urging resistance against Nazi occupation. While Anne found it beautifully written, inspiring, she also expressed skepticism about its practical effectiveness, particularly for Jewish citizens. Poignantly suggests that for them, this call might have been definitely too late, reflects their desperate, increasingly perilous situation.
They also experienced numerous frightening moments during Allied air raids targeting Germany, audible and sometimes felt in Amsterdam. Anne recounts one terrifying experience in complete darkness, shivering with fear, desperately wanting a candle's comfort, but her father, mindful of danger, refused. However, sudden, terrifying nearby machine gun fire prompted her mother, Edith, to defy caution and light the candle anyway, much to Pym's initial annoyance. Her justification. After all, Anne is not an ex-soldier, highlighting maternal instinct to protect from overwhelming fear.
Mrs. Van Daan's anxieties extended beyond air raids. Anne shares a telling story. One night, Mrs. Van Daan became convinced she heard loud footsteps in the attic. Terrified of burglars discovering them, she frantically woke her husband. Interestingly, her immediate concerns weren't solely safety, but also security of their precious sausages and dried beans, plus Peter's well-being. A small but insightful glimpse into her priorities, specific anxieties during hiding.
The relentless daily struggles continued. Anne notes terrible bombing raids on German cities, undoubtedly increasing their fears about the war's trajectory. Closer to home, she mentions Mr. Van Daan's increasing irritability, directly attributing it to the cigarette shortage. Highlights how even small deprivations significantly impacted mood. They also had serious debates about starting to consume precious canned food reserves, underscoring growing scarcity.
Practical, personal issues added difficulties. Anne describes her worsening shoe situation. Only impractical ski boots fit, flimsy straw thongs wore out quickly. Slim hope Miep might find shoes on the black market. Even simple tasks like Anne cutting her father's hair became noteworthy. Pym joked he'd never visit a barber again after the war, despite Anne occasionally nicking his ear. A reminder of the improvisational nature of their lives, small moments of humor still surfacing.
Amidst these ongoing challenges, Anne continued her self-imposed time killers, her studies. Proudly noted she'd completed shorthand, now diligently improving speed. Also developed a strong interest in mythology, Greek and Roman gods, though others dismissed it as a fleeting fancy. Underscores her intellectual curiosity, desire to find meaning, engagement in books, learning, even isolated.
A significant point of friction, source of considerable disappointment, moral indignation arose when others discovered Mr. Dussel secretly hoarding food. Anne recounts the upsetting discovery. Hidden bread, cheese, jam, even eggs in his cupboard. Expresses profound disappointment, moral outrage at his blatant selfishness, especially considering the Franks and Van Daan's kindness, sharing everything despite dwindling resources. Particularly upset by his stinginess with precious oranges Mr. Kleiman desperately needed for recurring stomach ailments. This discovery undoubtedly created a significant breach of trust, added another layer of tension, highlights potential for self-interest even in shared hardship.
Reflecting on their life around May 2nd, 1943, Anne offers a poignant, somewhat bittersweet perspective. Compared to unimaginable horrors faced by Jews not hiding, being persecuted, deported, their life in the Annex, despite hardships, could almost be considered a paradise. A sobering acknowledgement of relative safety, even as freedoms were completely curtailed.
Yet this is quickly followed by more introspective, maybe melancholic observation. Anne wonders how they, accustomed to comfort, had seemingly sunk so low manners, standards, basic possessions, provides telling examples. Permanently stained oilcloth, same unwashed flannel sheet Van Daan's used all winter, father's frayed trousers, mother's broken corset, Margot's too small bra, sharing undershorts due to scarcity. These details paint a vivid picture of gradual erosion of pre-war comforts, increasing reliance on meager resources.
Despite acknowledging material deprivations were likely temporary, Anne poignantly questions how they'd ever fully regain pre-war status, normalcy with such worn-out belongings. a moment of quiet reflection on long-term psychological, practical impact of extended confinement, irreversible loss of former lives, material security, underscores feeling that even if they survived, they'd return to a vastly different world with different challenges.
The constant need for secrecy, fear of discovery presented numerous ongoing daily challenges. Anne recounts the necessary, risky routine. Lighting a fire every other day just to burn accumulated garbage couldn't risk warehouse employees noticing unusual waste. Acutely understood precariousness. One small act of carelessness and we're done for. Constant vigilance, weight of the secret must have been incredibly taxing.
Adding to worries was disturbing news about Dutch college students asked by occupiers to sign a statement sympathizing with Germans. While Anne notes with pride, a majority bravely refused, following conscience. Potential penalty was severe, forced labor camp. Understandably raised serious concerns in the Annex about Dutch youth's uncertain future, potential for forced labor decimating their generation.
Sad, deeply concerning news arrived about Mr. Voskuil, one trusted helper. Expected ulcer surgery, but exams tragically revealed advanced inoperable cancer, planned surgery pointless. Had difficult task informing him of grim prognosis. Left him unable to work, deeply despondent, brooding at home, unable to provide for children. Anne expresses profound sympathy, feeling helpless, unable to visit or offer tangible support. Loss of Mr. Voskuil was personal sadness, but also significant practical blow to security, access to info from warehouse below.
Strained interpersonal dynamics continued. Anne recounts a particularly frustrating conflict with Mr. Dussel over limited study space. Dussel unilaterally decided he needed exclusive access to the main table afternoons, directly disrupting Anne's established routine, study time, highlights constant negotiation, occasional clashes over scarce resources, limited space.
Anne recounts her initial polite but firm refusal to yield afternoon study time, feeling insulted by Dussel's rude, demanding manner, initially discussed with Otto, who advised waiting. But Anne, feeling unfairly encroached upon, confronted Dussel directly after evening meal. Predictably led to furious, disproportionate reaction from Dussel, who, retaliating, began hoarding his secreted food even more diligently.
Understandably upset, Anne recounted this story to Otto. Otto, mediator, then had a lengthy, presumably strained conversation with Dussel trying to resolve conflict. Issue of fairness raised. Dussel apparently felt Anne acted like established resident, he the unwelcome intruder, despite his own self-centered behavior. While Otto defended Anne's right to study prior arrangements, this incident starkly illustrates cramped conditions, inevitable personality clashes when 8 individuals with differing needs lived in close, constant proximity under immense stress.
Heightened anxiety is further exacerbated by a frightening burglary. Peter Van Daan first noticed unsettling fact: warehouse and street entrance doors inexplicably open. Immediately raised significant alarm, strong suspicion, something amiss.
Prompted by Peter's alarming observation, Pym immediately checked radio for news, then securely locked office doors to hiding place. Following emergency protocol, everyone remained absolutely quiet, got fully dressed, ready for unknown threat. Tense waiting, not knowing what transpired, must have been incredibly stressful. Following morning brought palpable tension as Mr. Kleiman arrived later than usual, finally bringing unsettling news of break-in.
Kleiman's report confirmed worst fears. Burglars had forcibly broken into warehouse offices below, illicit gains. Cash boxes with little remaining money, blank checks, and most significantly for survival, their entire remaining allotment of precious sugar coupons. Major loss, significant blow to ability to obtain essential food. Difficulty getting new coupons immense, adding worries about scarcity, long-term sustainability. Burglary served as stark, terrifying reminder of vulnerability, constant dangers lurking just beyond walls.
In a small but welcome piece of news amidst difficulties, Anne mentions Friday, July 23, 1943, that Bep Voskuil managed to procure much-needed notebooks, blank journals for Anne, ledgers for Margot's bookkeeping. Practical acquisition must have boosted morale, ability to continue studies, routines.
Indeed, a valuable acquisition, paper likely increasingly scarce. Anne notes other notebooks available without coupons, but dismissively describes them as worthless gray paper. Highlights quality difference, importance of decent materials. Margot even considered calligraphy, perhaps another way to occupy time, develop skill. But Anne mentions her mother wouldn't allow Anne herself due to eye strain concerns and dim lighting, underscores constant considerations for health, well-being.
Ever-present threat of Allied air raids continued as significant source of fear, and vividly describes one intense experience. Chilling sound of droning planes, immediate primal fear of bombs falling nearby. Instinctively clutched her small escape bag, though likely recognized it offered little real hope venturing onto streets during raid equally, if not more, perilous.
Learned through experience, safest course was remaining inside, concealed, silent, being seen exposed hiding place. Anne recounts after tense, fear-filled half hour, plane sounds faded, life cautiously resumed usual routines. Provides snapshot of where each sought shelter during raid. Peter in front attic, Dussel front office, Mrs. Van Dane private office room, Mr. Van Dane loft, Frank's huddled on landing watching smoke from harbor, pervasive smell of fire, city enveloped in thick, ominous fog, stark visual reminder of ongoing destruction.
Anne's diary also offers intimate, often humorous observations of nightly routines, particularly Mr. Dussel's. Frequently notes his late returns from Mr. Kugler's office, rustling sounds bringing up, presumably consuming secret food, sounds of him making bed in shared room.
Even recounts her awkward nighttime trips, using tin can as makeshift toilet need for silence. On one occasion, saw Dussel in what she disapprovingly calls his indecent nightie. Small, slightly embarrassing moment of unintended intimacy. Anne describes lying awake, senses alert, listening for burglars, acutely aware of other sleep patterns, Dussel's noisy breathing, lip-smacking, restless sleep, vivid, humorous glimpse into lack of privacy, constant awareness of each other.
Anne's entries also capture small moments of relative peace, shifts in atmosphere during midday lunch break, when office tension temporarily eased. Describes collective relief Thursday, August 5th, 1943, when Mr. Van Maren and Mr. de Kock, warehouse workers they were wary of, left for lunch. Brief window for slightly less restricted movement, maybe more relaxed conversation.
During this lull, often heard vacuum cleaner upstairs, reminder of mundane life continuing outside. Anne notes Margot often used this time tutoring Dussel, dryly remarking on his status as slow learner. Father, Pym, often took advantage of quiet for reading, especially Dickens. Mother often helped Mrs. Van Daan with tasks and tidied bathroom. Also makes brief but significant introduction of Hep, nicknamed for Bep Vuskyle. Describes Hep sharing house, table during day, but not part of Annex family. Cheerful, good-humored, kind, always willing to assist. Hep played crucial role in survival, well-being.
Anne, ever observant of own behavior dynamics, describes new tactic employed during mealtimes coping with constant chatter, unwelcome opinions. Started consciously talking more to herself, conducting internal conversations. Found dual benefit. Mentally escaping chatter, preventing having to listen to annoying opinions. Cleverly applied same tactic when served disliked food, pretending delicious, try not to look. Resourceful, humorous coping mechanism.
Her morning routine also evolved into efficient, solitary process. Recounts deliberate effort getting out of bed quickly, focusing on thought of returning to bed later as small comfort. Small, personal strategies highlight resilience, developing ways creating personal space, mental escape within restrictive environment.
And also offers glimpses into mundane but essential potato peeling. Describes own routine, observes father's focused, precise technique. Contrasts Mrs. Van Daan's less efficient attempts engaging Dussel while peeling, attempts Dussel pointedly ignored, highlighting strained relations. Eventually, Mrs. Van Daan changed tactic, asked own husband to put on apron, assist. Small domestic scene.
Descriptions of ordinary routines, even potato peeling, provide vivid, intimate picture. Through small observations, gain better understanding of individual personalities, interactions, subtle tensions, alliances within confined community.
And provides snapshot of well-established morning routine, almost clockwork efficiency. Everyone knew jobs, moved around office with practiced familiarity. Recounts one morning Peter, hasty, went to warehouse but forgot essential bread. Minor oversight likely caused morning chaos.
Also recounts humorous incident with Cat Mushi escaping Peter in office below. Brief moment feline freedom, panic searching. Contrasts lighter moments with Mr. Van Daan's abrupt, grumpy demeanor that morning, assumed related to issue with Mr. Kugler, underscores fluctuating moods, undercurrents of tension.
Upstairs, morning routine equally established. Hot cereal delivery, quick getting ready, significant marker, clock striking 8:30, signaling need for absolute silence. Anne paints picture of ideal family scene often following, everyone quietly reading, studying together on sagging bed. Brief moment shared, peaceful coexistence before day's challenges unfolded.
However, beneath veneer of routine, occasional peace, entries increasingly reveal rising tensions, growing conflicts, particularly with Van Daan's. Mentions Instant's father, Otto, visibly furious, apparently suspecting Van Daan's secretly holding back shared food. Accusation likely stem from anxieties about scarcity, unequal distribution, and expresses strong desire to simply leave, feeling increasingly overwhelmed, driven to brink by persistent, often petty conflicts, underscores immense psychological strain living so close under constant pressure.
Around October 17, 1943, mixed news. Mr. Kleiman returned after illness. Pale but good spirits. Had task. Attempt selling some Mr. Van Dane's clothes for much-needed income for financially strapped family. Overshadowed by troubling news. Mr. Van Daan lost last 100 guilders in warehouse. Significant sum. Loss created further financial difficulties, unfortunately sowed suspicion among warehouse staff, added unease, worse, lost money subsequently stolen, thief unknown, fueling mistrust, anxiety.
Kleiman's health continued worry. Anne notes, October 29th, 1943, he wasn't well. Stomach bleeding possibly not stopped, seemed genuinely downcast. Adding to tension were increasingly frequent, intense arguments between Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan, largely fueled by dire financial situation, confinement strain, attempts selling coat, suit unsuccessful, prices unrealistically high, desperate attempt, sell Miss Van Daan's 17-year-old rabbit fur coat.
Miraculously, sale yielded significant 325 guilders, enormous amount, Anne notes. Unexpected windfall immediately ignited another fierce argument. Mrs. Van Daan initially insisted keeping entire sum, likely wanting personal security. Met strong opposition from Mr. Van Daan, argued vehemently money desperately needed for shared household expenses. Anne recounts terrifying screaming, shouting during battle, intense emotional volatility. Ultimately, after terrifying argument, compromise seemingly reached. Money tentatively earmarked household expenses, underlying resentment likely lingered. Anne poignantly describes own family's anxiety, fear during altercations.
Constant stress, emotional turmoil clearly taking toll on Anne. Admits increased stress, often crying alone at night, deeply grateful for small moments' solitude. Mentions noticeable lack of appetite, others concerned about pale, thin appearance. Began giving her supplements. Anne candidly acknowledges nerves frequently getting better of her, particularly Sunday's stifling atmosphere, enforced silence, overwhelming feeling trapped. During challenging times, felt profound lost connection with assumed family, like caged bird, desperate for freedom, understanding. Often used sleep as temporary escape from pervasive silence, ever-present fear.
Amidst tense circumstances, life continued peculiarly. Margot diligently sent Latin lessons to teacher via BEP, maintaining semblance education. Teacher apparently nice, good sense humor. Meanwhile, Dussel entered period of considerable turmoil, not speaking to Mr. or Mrs. Van Daan for days. Silent treatment likely stemmed from unresolved conflict.
Anne's mother, pragmatic, sensing potential further conflict, wisely warned Dussel about Mrs. Van Daan's volatile temperament, capacity making life unpleasant if feud continued. Dussel remained steadfast, claiming Mr. Van Daan initiated silence, refused be one break it, showcasing stubbornness, maybe desire assert control. Anne notes November 16th marked somber first anniversary Dussel moving in. While Anne's mother received small plant acknowledging milestone, Mrs. Van Daan pointedly ignored occasion, further highlighting deep divisions, lack harmony.
Anne's thoughts also frequently turned to dear friend Hannah Goslar. Expressed deep hope for Hannah's survival, often imagined future after war finding Hannah, offering help, support, feeling guilt for past perceived wrongs. Constantly wondered about Hannah's thoughts, feelings, praying for comfort, well-being. Acknowledged emotional toll dwelling on these thoughts, admitting vivid image Hannah's enormous eyes, reflecting fear or suffering haunted her. Wrestled with questions about Hannah's true belief in God during such difficult times, reflecting complexities faith facing unimaginable hardship.
Despite somber atmosphere, inhabitants found small ways mark special occasions, bring joy. St. Nicholas Day, December 5th, 1943, continued tradition. Prepared personalized verses, arranged decorated laundry basket with small, thoughtful gifts inside shoes. Humorous note accompanied gifts, read aloud, acknowledging significantly changed circumstances compared previous years' more plentiful celebration. Light-hearted acknowledgement hardships, combined joy finding small tokens affection, brought much-needed laughter, sense shared humanity.
Anne also suffered unpleasant, debilitating bout of flu. Describes dreadful experience, especially given close quarters, constant need muffle coughs, recounts trying various home remedies, milk with honey, steam, compresses within constraints. In somewhat uncomfortable gesture, Dussel played doctor, even listening to chest with ear, and found awkward, intrusive. Underscores lack proper medical care, added anxieties being ill while hiding.
In more introspective, deeply personal entry, Anne expresses profound longing, normalcy, genuine understanding, articulates overwhelming feelings shut up, confined so long, yearning simple freedoms, pleasures, normal teenage life, openly wonders if anyone will ever truly understand depth's experiences, inner world. Poignantly misses having mother with whom share deep understanding connection. Often imagined kind mother she'd aspire be. Reflects on imperfect way addressing own mother momsy or moms, feeling even this revealed distance compared more mature mom she longed use.
Despite hardships, anxieties, inhabitants experienced brief, unexpected moment festive cheer around Christmas 1943. Anne notes received very first Christmas present ever, Friday evening before holiday. Wonderful surprise from dedicated helpers. Christmas cake decorated piece 1944, festive cookies, special treat yogurt young people, beer adults, collection nicely wrapped individual gifts. Anne describes holidays passing quietly but with unexpected burst joy, generosity from those risking safety care for them. Must have been deeply touching.
Anne's relationship with diary continued to deepen. Reflective entry notes had increasingly become precious memory book, holding immense personal significance. Realized could mentally write over and done with on many earlier pages, signifying passage time, accumulation, vast array experiences, ordinary and extraordinary. Diary truly become constant companion, repository innermost thoughts, feelings.
Anne's understanding of mother, Edith, also underwent significant evolution. While readily acknowledged own moments, intense fury, frustration towards mother, also began to recognize, understand mother's underlying tenderness, incredibly difficult circumstances often contributing irritability, emotional state, growing empathy, development more nuanced perspective marked significant step Anne's emotional maturity.
Particularly significant development Anne's inner life, burgeoning feelings for Peter Van Daan. Candidly writes, crying at night, feeling had to beg Peter even small favors, attention, but resolved, make conscious effort, visit his room more often, try encourage him, open up, talk. Marks shift approach towards relationship from frustration to proactive desire connection.
And careful clarify diary doesn't believe romantically in love Peter this stage, does acknowledge would actively seek friendship if you were girl, highlighting platonic basis initial connection, underlying need close confidant. Recounts particularly vivid, tender dream about Peter's Schiff, earlier romantic interest eyes met, spoke softly, felt gentle touched cheek. Dream clearly left lasting impression.
Moment hopeful introspection and expresses feeling God may have sent Peter Van Daan specifically help her through challenging times. Finds strength, comfort, growing connection, declaring private ownership, affection, petal is mine and nobody knows it. Marks clear turning point emotional landscape signifies increasing importance Peter in inner world.
As limited resources dwindled, Anne notes January 15, 1944, increasingly strict measures dividing meager food. Careful rationing meat, fats, oils. Decision start frying on potatoes, raw stretch meals. Need consume extra dry, rye bread, quell persistent hunger. Paint stark picture growing food insecurity.
Amidst anxieties, hardships, humorous, relatable debate arose concerning Kat's gender. Discussing cat boche, swollen tummy led initial speculation, alarm about pregnancy, more likely culprit, pilfered bones. Despite revelation, Peter stubbornly insisted Boche male, leading somewhat farcical, ultimately unsuccessful expedition warehouse definitively ascertain sex. Lighthearted disagreement provides small, welcome moment levity.
Precarious confined situation also led various hypothetical, anxious discussions about possibility escaping flood. Imagined scenarios reveal underlying anxieties about vulnerability within Annex, potential unforeseen disasters compounding dire circumstances. Clearly spent time contemplating escape plans, various fears associated, highlighting constant awareness, fragility, safety.
During one Jan's visits, differing opinions arose regarding potential German actions, overall danger level. Jan, perhaps more contact outside world, clinging hope, seemed more skeptical immediate threats. Annex inhabitants, living constant fear, witnessed much brutality, held more pessimistic view based own experiences, grim news. Difference perspective likely created tension, differing anxiety levels.
And found unexpected moment common ground. Connection with Peter when he expressed critical opinions about Dus's behavior. And recounts feeling strong fellowship, feeling reminded, comfortable relationships previously shared girlfriends. Small instance, shared disapproval seemed strengthened bond, allowed more open, candid interaction. Following minor, unspecified run in Dussel, Anne recounts somewhat amusing incident Tuesday, February 15, 1944. Dussel apparently triumphantly informed Anne's mother Peter apologized for Sunday evening incident, despite Peter being angry, resistant at time. And privy Peter's earlier frustration expresses secret amazement, Peter's unexpected act humbling himself, offering apology. Small event likely signaled subtle shift Peter's behavior, perhaps growing awareness needs some harmony.
Anne's interactions Peter began increase noticeably. Recounts instances volunteering fetch potatoes, encountering Peter, often offered help, even taking heavy pan. Returning upstairs, sought him out, asked what working on, growing interest activities, desire connection. Even recounts missing potential meeting while preoccupied fixing hair, small, relatable teenage self-consciousness, perhaps hint burgeoning romantic interest. Missing opportunity left her tearful, dejected, underscoring increasing importance interactions Peter emotional life.
Despite ongoing hardships, confinement, Anne began articulate newfound, profound appreciation, beauty, solace found nature, own inner world.
expressed deep belief, true happiness, always rediscovered looking God, natural world, offered advice whenever loneliness, sadness overwhelming, simply go loft space, look up vast sky, suggests growing inner strength, way finding peace, perspective, even incredibly limited physical environment.
Anne's conversations. Peter also became more frequent, candid. Recounts instance playfully told him they, Annex inhabitants, were terrible gossips, specifically admitted own particular enjoyment discussing often challenging Duzzle. Peter's reaction, honesty, was blush, perhaps sign developing feelings or embarrassment directness. Anne noted surprise, Peter's seemingly genuine agreement, her negative assessment his own parents, further breaking down social barriers, allowing more open communication.
Connection, closeness continued deepen. Describes instances sitting together stairs, talking extended periods, often becoming so engrossed completely forgot tasks, like fetching potatoes. Anne notes warmth Peter's gazes, confesses feeling could very easily fall of him, indicating clear shift feelings beyond mere friendship. Even had evening conversation discomfort heat, individual physical reactions, temperature changes, sharing personal details suggests growing intimacy, comfort.
Particularly reflective entry, Tuesday, March 7, 1944, and look back past self 1942, viewing younger version almost completely different person. Recalled time seemed enjoy heavenly existence, surrounded admirers, friends, popularity, possessions. Questioned how managed charms so many, referencing Peter's recent comment found her attractive, while acknowledging own cleverness, wit earlier period.
Anne proceeded to describe past self, terrible flirt, coquettish and amusing, while recognizing positive qualities, hardworking, honest, generous. Pondered whether admiration received might lead overly confident, spoiled. Now viewed sudden, dramatic plunge, stark reality, hiding perhaps beneficial course correction. Recalled how schoolmates perceived her class comedian, ringleader.
Ultimately, Anne concluded reflection of viewing past version pleasant but ultimately superficial, almost unrelated person become during hiding. Remembered Peter's past perception, her always laughing, stark contrast, more introspective, serious young woman become. Poignant reflection truly highlights significant personal growth, profound self-awareness, and developed through extraordinary experiences.
Around Friday, March 10th, 1944, series unfortunate events befell Annex inhabitants, support network. Anne noted Meep, ever reliable helper, fallen ill, unable come. Additionally, Mr. Kleiman, also unwell, didn't return work expected, adding anxieties outside connections. Perhaps most concerning, arrest man identified only Mr. M, crucial supplier, essential black market goods, potatoes, butter, jam, who had large family. Arrest represented significant disruption, precarious food supply, adding tense atmosphere. Sudden, unsettling scare involving loud knock while adjacent building. Amidst negative events, Anne confessed lack motivation, even right detail, admitting focus become more intensely internal, personal. Express looking forward afternoon time Peter, revealing growing importance, connection source comfort, perhaps normalcy amidst chaos. Believed Peter too enjoyed time together, suggesting mutual warmth, growing intimacy.
Anne's internal world continued intense reflection, emotional complexity. Noted while increasingly felt understood Peter, still lacked single person whom truly confide all innermost thoughts, feelings without reservation. Need his presence, connection undeniably growing, clarified not seeking constant companionship but rather true, trusted confidant, someone shared deepest parts herself. Questioned when often turbulent thoughts finally become clear, when ultimately find lasting inner peace amidst turmoil. Internal struggle highlights ongoing psychological impact confinement, universal human need, deep, meaningful connection.
Anne's entry Tuesday, March 14th, 1944, paints bleak picture food situation, highlighting severe shortages. Described truly terrible meal, attributing poor quality lack, essential ration coupons, fats cooking, absence regular helpers, stench old, overcooked kale, permeated air, potatoes diseased, unappetizing. Anne somberly reflected being hiding fourth-year war, certainly no picnic, stark understatement, grim reality.
Then meticulously recorded differing opinions of 5 adults regarding increasingly dire situation, pointedly noting children not allowed voice perspectives. Mrs. Van Daan particularly voiced many complaints. Difficulties cooking without adequate oil fats, unpleasant smells, perceived ingratitude, growing fear, actual starvation, pessimistic belief Germans ultimately win. Mr. Van Daan expressed frustration through anger, general irritability. Anne's mother, Edith, clearly worried, attempted to maintain semblance optimism. Father, Otto, remained quietly thoughtful, deeply concerned dwindling resources, uncertain future. Dussel, characteristically, focused on selfish concerns, added own stream complaints, and listed series worrisome ifs related potential continued absence illness helpers, each scenario creating further layers uncertainty, fear about ability to sustain themselves.
Anne also poignantly described intense internal struggle, desperately wanting shared deeper feelings, anxieties Peter, knowing had restrained herself, allow him initiate intimate conversations, confessed feeling crazy these increasingly crazy times, finding crucial outlet, grounding, writing thoughts, feelings diary. Couldn't help wonder what Peter truly thought, whether able see beneath granite mask facade often presented. Even pondered complex nature burgeoning relationship, questioning whether what felt for him or he felt her, akin pity, given shared difficult circumstances. Entry reveals depth emotional turmoil, growing awareness complexities, human connection under extreme duress.
Anne's entries this period reveal developing increasingly nuanced understanding adult relationships, often taboo, subject sexuality. Reflected apparent fears many adults harbored about children forming different perspectives, marriage, intimacy once understood concept, purity, often based unrealistic nonsensical societal expectations. Interestingly, expressed own belief wasn't necessarily wrong. Men bring prior experienced marriage, challenging prevailing norms. Recounted own gradual piecemeal learning menstruation, sexual matters through conversations, friend Jacques Forheining, own intuition. Mentioned learned contraception from father, though still unanswered questions, desire more open, honest information. Expressed strong belief mothers should be more open, communicative children about fundamental aspects of life, relationships, advocating greater transparency, understanding.
Truly significant, memorable event occurred, and Peter spent extended period together one evening by open window. Peter initiated conversation, asking if refused sausage earlier due last minor disagreement, and clarified not reason. Later evening, after taking water, Margot, Anne went Peter's small room seeking fresh air. Initially, stood together Van Dan's window, likely maintain appearances propriety. Soon moved Peter's own open window, semi-darkness evening. Began talk openly, honestly, sharing what Anne described so much couldn't possibly recount all. Poignantly declared, felt most wonderful evening ever experienced within Annex, discussing wide range personal subjects, forging deeper emotional connection. Real turning point.
Interactions deepening connection continued. Peter explicitly asked Anne come his room again evening, even suggesting room for two by window. Anne, while needing to consider parents' potential objections spending too much time, Peter agreed, joined again Saturday evening. Specifically asked possibility of seeing moon from his window. Peter suggested might get better view, moon downstairs office areas. Interestingly, Anne noted felt significantly less scared potential burglars when with Peter, highlighting sense safety, comfort found his presence. Evening conversation. Saturday touched subject boys and described slightly embarrassing but ultimately nice discuss openly Peter. Realized neither imagined having such frank open conversations, intimate matters someone opposite sex. Peter even mentioned term presentive mitten, German word prophylactics. Same night, Anne, Margot had own private conversation bathroom about mutual acquaintances. Bram, trees, further underscoring evolving understanding relationships, sexuality.
Moment profound self-awareness, reflection, and recorded Saturday, March 25th, 1944. Realization how drastically changed inwardly, outwardly during hiding. Recognized significant shifts, opinions, ideas, development, more critical outlook, changes felt largely better. Reflected inherent difficulty transitioning complex realities adulthood after experiencing years perhaps uncritical adoration before war. Placed some responsibility earlier dynamic parents, feeling often encouraged, agree, primarily shown only own perspectives conflicts. Through annex experiences come greater understanding 50-50 nature situations, acknowledging mistakes rarely one-sided, identifying shortcomings, behavior everyone. Expressed growing desire maintain peace, harmony, actively trying to avoid unnecessary quarreling, gossip, goal found easier to achieve father, Margot, than mother. Felt gaining better understanding, navigating interactions, Mr. and Mrs. Van Don. Anne reiterated core belief honesty, importance telling people directly what thought, albeit tactfully. Recounted instance, Mrs. Van Dam complained, giving precious rice, Mr. Kleiman, sentiment and strongly disagreed, emphasizing crucial importance, helping dedicated helpers, risking so much. Entry showcases and significant personal growth, increasingly mature understanding self, relationships.
And also expressed growing frustration adults, seemingly constant radio listening habits. Noted annoyance radio on practically morning till night, viewing evidence infinite patience, but also feeling brains slowly turning mush, endless broadcasts. Felt one. Perhaps 2 news broadcasts a day should be sufficient. Listed several specific programs speakers adults regularly tuned into. Observed majority conversations seemed to revolve same limited topics. Eating, sleeping, politics, and worried potential monotonous existence stifle own intellectual growth, express strong desire not become dreary old crone, result confinement.
Anne's internal landscape continued complex mixed emotions, particularly concerning mother, evolving relationship Peter. Described growing feeling emotionally against mother, noting father largely ignored ongoing conflict. While mother clearly sat in distance, Anne admitted wasn't particularly unhappy, feeling mother's opinions, reactions no longer held same significance. Contrast, express strong desire, not give up connection, Peter, acknowledging admiration, seeing potential beautiful, meaningful relationship develop, though felt frustrated perceived interference adults. Despite strong internal feelings, Peter, Anne noted, managing outwardly conceal full extent emotions. Couldn't help wonder if Peter ever openly expressed feelings, if relationship eventually leads physical intimacy, reflecting natural curiosity, burgeoning sexuality, teenager experiencing first real romantic connection.
Anne's entries around this time reveal renewed, intensified focus education, future aspirations. Recognize fundamental importance, continuing schoolwork, even difficult circumstances. Avoid intellectual stagnation. Actively pursue long-held dream, becoming journalist after war. Expressed growing confidence, general writing abilities, also engage more critical self-assessment, questioning whether truly possessed innate talent necessary to achieve ambitious goals. Specifically mentioned two own literary creations, fairy tale Eva's Dream, story Caddy's Life. Anne described herself both own best, harshest critic, demonstrating healthy self-awareness. Expressed deep gratitude, gift writing ability, viewing vital part herself, crucial means self-expression. Articulated strong desire, not live life solely defined roles, wife, mother, but rather useful world, leave lasting impact through work. Concluded reflection, sincerely thanking God, precious gift writing talent.
Period intense excitement, profound anxiety gripped Annex following what initially perceived genuine police raid. Anne's entry, Tuesday, April 11th, 1944, vividly describes events preceding days, led late-night scare. Seemingly normal evening monopoly, unsettling sounds, heavy firing, shared enjoyment, Mozart concert, Peter front attic, minor cushion incident Dussel. Then sudden, alarming arrival father, Mr. Van Dane, urgent news, believed police about raid building. Panic ensued. Lights immediately switched off. Everyone tiptoed upstairs landing, waiting anxiously darkness. Men cautiously went back downstairs investigate, returned later details. Heard suspicious noises, office below, seen flashlight beam, assuming burglars, made fateful decision, call police. Then, adding confusion, heard distinct sounds, someone trying open hidden bookcase, followed familiar whistle meep, loyal helper, trying to get attention without alerting anyone. Mrs. Van Dane's fear reached almost unbearable level. Relief washed over when finally realized Jan, another trusted helper, arrived to check on them. Prevailing theory disturbance likely caused Van Maren, somewhat unreliable employee. Despite relief, fear future attempts, genuine raid lingered heavily. And characteristic spirit, resolve be brave, remember duty, remain hidden, reaffirm belief somehow, way out, Jewish people endured, survived century suffering, declared while once felt ready, die soldier if necessary, greatest desire now live, become Dutch citizen after war.
Secret Annex continued face series ongoing problems, mounting worries. Anne noted Van Maren likely responsible stealing precious potato flour, then trying unfairly blame Bep, causing considerable anger, distress, loyal helper. Adding financial woes, appraiser offered surprisingly low price remaining valuable chest drawers. Most tragically, health-trusted helper Mr. Vosgeil continued rapid decline. Developed high fever. Doctors delivered devastating news condition now considered hopeless, cancer tragically spread lungs. Anne expressed deep sympathy him, family, feeling utterly helpless, unable to offer real comfort, support. Amidst difficult circumstances, Anne found small outlet writing, creating amusing fictional story, Blurry the Explorer.
Despite ever-present anxieties, occasional crises, Anne's intellectual life within confines remarkably busy, diverse. Provided detailed lists various subjects studied single day, English, French, history, geography, algebra, geometry, shorthand. Showcasing impressive commitment learning, wide-ranging intellectual curiosity. Powerful testament resilience, determination make most time hiding, even faced immense uncertainty, fear.
Truly significant, emotionally charged, intimate moment occurred. Anne, Peter. Described sitting very closely, experiencing overwhelming surge, emotion brought tears' eyes. Interestingly, Peter remained physically still, silent during intense feeling. Later, went to his room, embraced, shared kiss, clear indication, deepening romantic connection. Subsequent conversation revolved shared future, quiet assurances offered each other. Burgeoning romance didn't go entirely unnoticed. Anne's father expressed concern, close friendship, potentially evolving full-fledged love affair. Peter, perhaps sensing need, reassure Otto, promised remain controlled interactions. Anne. Despite father's understandable concern, Anne's desire to spend time, Peter remained strong, fueled sense trust, affection clearly growing.
Anne engaged period, profound self-reflection, feeling deep shame, regret past letter-written father, likely one expressed earlier frustrations, criticisms. Deeply moved his subsequent forgiveness, unwavering kindness. Experience led greater awareness, own shortcomings, realizing still had much learned navigating relationships, needed to take responsibility, own actions rather than constantly blaming others. Acknowledged current sorrow, emotional pain, but drew distinction between present feelings, father's past moments, desperation, perhaps recognizing different burdens each carried. Introspective moment highlights Anne's growing emotional maturity, increasing capacity, self-assessment, empathy.
Food situation continued downward spiral, becoming increasingly miserable. Entries paint stark picture meager, often unappetizing meals. Watery hot cereal, half-cooked bitter spinach, rotting potatoes carefully inspected before cooking, even boiled lettuce leading state near constant gnawing hunger. Moment dark humor, and imagine ravenous behavior if ever a 10-party hosted generous helper meep, highlighting extent food deprivation.
Lighter domestic moment, Anne recounts humorous note appeared bathroom door, outlining carefully constructed scheduled bathroom usage among 8 inhabitants. Practical measure followed classic, slightly cheeky joke Mr. Van Don, referencing Adam, Eve, Garden Eden, adding touch levity, often tense atmosphere surrounding shared facilities.
Another rather amusing incident involving Cat Mushi provided brief moment unexpected chaos, laughter. Mushi's soggy, overflowing litter box attic led unfortunate accident. Puddle cat urine leaked through floorboards directly onto dining table below, unfortunately splattering precious potatoes laid out. And, despite unpleasantness, found situation quite funny, recounted varying degrees shock, disgust among others. Resulting strong, lingering smell undoubtedly added another layer of discomfort, cramped living conditions.
Anne also recorded particularly telling argument, erupted Mr. Mrs. Van Daan. Following unspecified incident, Mrs. Van Daan dramatically claimed Mr. Van Daan physically hurt her. Anne, characteristic, sharp wit, responded to outbursts, sarcastic comment referencing Mozart, perhaps alluding melodrama. Peter, somewhat impatiently, returned carrying belt, significance not entirely clear but suggests potential escalation or attempt to mediate. Mrs. Van Daan demanded formal apology husband, which Mr. Van Daan offered quickly, insincerely, highlighting superficiality, lacked genuine resolution, frequent quarrels.
Despite ongoing hardships, increasing anxieties, and thirst knowledge, unwavering writing ambitions continued burn brightly. Recorded asking questions, various biblical stories, demonstrating intellectual curiosity, desire to learn more world, both within, beyond immediate experience. Expressed feeling full to bursting ideas, things wanted to learn, write, greatest persistent wish remain become journalist, famous writer after war. Revealed plans, write book-based diary entries, tentatively titled The Secret Annex, envisioning personal account becoming published work.
Anne also noted completion fictional story, Caddy's life. Briefly summarizing ending, revealing narrative actually loosely based aspects, own father's life before war. Highlights developing creative writing skills, tendency draw inspiration, own experiences, lives those around her, even confined circumstances.
Father's birthday, parents' wedding anniversary fell Saturday, May 13th, 1944. Anne lovingly described small but meaningful gifts received helpers, Van Daan family, recounted delicious treats managed to enjoy, rare indulgence amidst rationing, took note beautiful chestnut tree, full bloom outside window, small reminder natural beauty still existed beyond confined world.
Unfortunate mishap occurred. Some Anne's precious papers, writings attic, somehow got stuck together, likely dampness or accident. Carefully undertook task drying them, noting somewhat funny sight historical figures nude sketches, inadvertently stuck together. Mr. Van Daan, often crude sense humor, made Rassen Shonday joke unintended mixing figures different backgrounds using derogatory term. Anne, perhaps feeling fragility work, then entrusted carefully preserved papers Peter's safekeeping.
Reflections increasingly anticipated Allied invasion, disheartening rise, anti-Semitism outside world filled Anne's thoughts. Discussed invasion being primarily England's decision, significant role British forces expected play. Sadly, Anne recorded disheartening news changing attitudes towards Jewish people, noting rise anti-Semitic sentiment even circles previously felt accepted. Grappled understandable, though ultimately not justifiable, reasons behind growing hatred, such as false accusations, Jews supposedly betraying helpers hiding, and poignantly pleaded understanding, questioned how non-Jewish people might act same desperate, terrifying situation.
Despite immense suffering, pervasive atmosphere, fear, persecution, Anne's deep, abiding love Netherlands remained steadfast. Expressed profound affection Holland, continued hope eventually become true fatherland once again after war, demonstrating strong sense national identity, unwavering hope better future.
News arrived Thursday, May 25, 1944, concerning Bep Foskyle, engaged man named Bertus. Anne's reaction, clear disapproval. Felt Bep didn't truly love Bertus. He was somehow holding her back full potential, finding more fulfilling relationship. Reveals Anne's own developing ideas, love, relationships, personal fulfillment, even amidst own confinement.
Anne's emotional state took significant downturn around Friday, May 26, 1944. Recorded feeling utterly broken, overwhelmed confluence, various negative news, own disappointment, Peter Van Dan reasons not fully specified particular entry. Poignantly contrasted feelings visory, any positive events occurred, highlighting constant enormous gap between moments laughter, ever-present specter fear, despair defined existence. Stark contrast underscored emotional roller coaster all living on.
Renewed intensified sense fear permeated Annex following what referred Van Hoven business. Likely incident heightened awareness, constant threat discovery. Lead period increased quietness, extreme caution within hiding place, acutely aware ever-present danger police. Anne confessed own fear become almost overwhelming times, but consciously refused write down absolute worst anxieties diary, perhaps way trying maintain semblance control own thoughts. Mentioned while felt brave enough go bathroom alone, underlying fear always present, small but telling detail, constant state alert.
Arrival hot summer weather, late May 1944, added another layer discomfort challenging existence. Anne's entry Wednesday, May 31st, 1944, describes unbearable heat persisted several days, making confined living space even more oppressive, uncomfortable. Noted various complaints, expressions discomfort everyone, highlighting how even simple weather significantly impact already strained physical, emotional well-being.
Then Tuesday, June 6, 1944, came momentous, long-awaited news: Allied invasion Normandy. D-Day landings. Anne's entry reflects immense excitement. Surge hope swept through Annex upon hearing news. Detailed scale operation, powerful speeches, various Allied leaders. Sense huge commotion, overwhelming hope, eventual liberation, filled confined space. Despite immense suffering already endured, all knew needed remain calm, steadfast, but news undoubtedly provided significant morale boost, renewed sense possibility.
As more details, Allied invasion emerged and continued process significance events. Noted Allies' successful capture by you, fierce ongoing fighting strategically important came in. Reports war correspondents provided further updates progress liberation efforts. Interestingly, Anne mentioned Churchill initially wanted land troops himself, testament leadership, determination, but ultimately persuaded against it. More personal reflections and considered evolving relationship Peter, noting clear affection existed between them, even if perhaps more akin deep friendship than full-blown romantic relationship point. Pondered mysterious force seemed holding them back more overtly romantic connection. Questioned whether own longing him might somewhat exaggerated shared confinement but still acknowledged undeniable strength feelings. While saw Peter fundamentally kind, good-hearted, also recognized aspects personality found disappointing, such as apparent dislike religion, some contributions, table conversations. Remained convinced wouldn't quarrel each other, appreciating peace-loving, tolerant nature, evident efforts improve himself. Yet couldn't help wonder why seemed hide innermost self-true feelings so often, expressing belief even most closed-off individuals eventually long confide someone.
And also contemplated profound impact shared years, confinement. Annex Peter, describing period shared contemplation, inward reflection. Acknowledged missing real thing, full unfettered experienced life, but held on to beliefs still existed, awaited them. Mused whether growing intense love nature direct result forced confinement, making more acutely aware what missing. Recalled time before hiding when beauty natural world hadn't captivated same way. Vividly described longing sea moon, vast expanse night sky, even overcoming deep-seated fear burglars steal furtive glances out windows. Somberly reflected profound isolation, simple joys nature compared those living freely outside.
Powerful, impassioned entry and articulated strong views importance, often overlooked struggles women society. Argued forcefully greater respect women, noting while men often held women high esteem, admiration didn't always translate true equality understanding. Pointed out immense suffering, remarkable courage women routinely displayed childbirth, comparing bravery war heroes yet lamenting lack societal recognition, value afforded women's contributions. Clarified wasn't necessarily advocating fewer children, but rather condemning prevalent societal value system, failed adequately acknowledge vital, often invisible roles women played. Expressed agreement ideas, author Paul de Croof, emphasizing need men truly understand significant burdens women often bear. Entry reveals Anne's growing feminist consciousness, sharp observations, gender roles, societal expectations.
Already precarious food situation took another turn worse, as potato supply dwindled almost nothing. Anne noted begun drastic measure rationing potatoes individually, adding difficulties. Meep, indispensable helper, taking much-needed week vacation, leaving more isolated. Worrying note, Mr. Kleiman's recent medical tests yielded inconclusive results, leaving torn, uncertain whether undergo potentially risky surgery. Converging difficulties created atmosphere, heightened anxiety, uncertainty.
Much-needed surge positive news arrived Tuesday, June 27, 1944, bringing significant shift overall mood. Received confirmation, Allied forces successfully capturing Cherbourg, Major Port Normandy, News-Fall Vitebsk, Slobin East, signaling significant German losses Eastern Front. Report entire Cotentin Peninsula now under Allied control further fueled hopes eventual, perhaps sooner than expected, liberation. Influx encouraging news provided much-needed morale boost. Renewed sense tide war might indeed be turning favor.
Arrival strawberry season early July 1944 brought rare, welcome abundance. Mr. Brock's helpful contact managed to obtain large quantity fresh strawberries. Unexpected bounty-led flurry activity, everyone pitching evenings, mornings, canned strawberries, make jam, rare opportunities shared, relatively normal activity. And humorously described temporary chaos office kitchen, everyone involved, sticky, fragrant process. Had to be extra careful, adhere strict house rule, not running water whenever strangers downstairs warehouse, adding layer clandestine activity jam making. Mr. Kugler, another helper, apparently had humorous reaction, sheer volume strawberries acquired. Initial issues, canning process, led father taking task making jam every evening, preserved fruit. Brief period, seemed eating strawberries absolutely everything. Delightful period, further enhanced babe, bringing generous 20 pounds fresh peas. Recounted mother's announcement, mandatory pea shelling duty, everyone own amusing discovery, surprisingly tasty inner linings pea pods. Brief period, relative abundance, shared activity, must provided welcome respite, usual anxieties, restrictions.
Finally, the historical context provided in the epilogue sadly details the eventual fates of Elizabeth Bepp Voskylevik, Miep Santrishitskis, and her husband Jan, who all thankfully survived the war. It then recounts the tragic deportation of the 8 residents of the Secret Annex to Westerbork and subsequently to Auschwitz on September 3, 1944. The epilogue outlines the heartbreaking details of the deaths of Herman van Pels, Van Don, Augusta van Pels, Petronella van Don, Peter van Pels van Don, and Fritz Pfeffer, Albert Dussel, in various concentration camps, painting a stark and absolutely devastating picture of the consequences of their capture.
This deep dive into these powerful excerpts from Anne Frank's diary offers us profound, deeply moving insights into her life as a young teenager, navigating the extraordinary, terrifying circumstances of hiding. We witness her evolving relationships with family, friends within intense confines, her burgeoning romantic feelings, Peter, keen observations, dynamics around her, intellectual curiosity, unwavering commitment, learning, writing, hopes, dreams, future, ever-present fears, remarkable, poignant journey, self-discovery during unimaginable time.
Anne's writing, so deeply personal, raw, filled both universal experiences, adolescence, unique challenges situation, continues have enduring, powerful impact us all. Serves timeless reminder, devastating human cost intolerance, prejudice, hatred. Also spans testament, incredible resilience, enduring hope, indomitable spirit, individual human being, even faith, unimaginable adversity.
And so, we leave you, our listener, with this final thought. Consider the inherent challenges, complexities of adolescence, even under most normal circumstances. Now imagine how those universal struggles might be amplified, distorted, intensified by extraordinary, life-threatening situation Anne, her family faced. What profound lessons can we, living very different worlds, still learn about resilience, about enduring power, hope, about vital importance, personal reflection from her remarkably honest, deeply moving experiences within Secret Annex? It's a great deal to contemplate. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.